Good evening and welcome to NTD UK News. I'm Stuart Lees and here are today's top stories. Double-jabbed EU and US travellers arrive in the UK full of joy after months away from families. Scientists found no traces of the CCP virus at 4 major railway stations and on intercity train services. And protesters and police clashed during banned protests in Berlin against lockdown measures on Sunday. 1 man died. International travellers from the US and EU expressed their joy as they arrived this morning in the UK. From 4 a.m. Monday, those travellers are no longer required to quarantine upon arrival if double vaccinated. Here's NTD's Neil Woodrow with a travel update.
After months of being apart, families started to see each other again on Monday morning after the restrictive quarantine was lifted for double-vaccinated EU and US travellers entering the UK. This morning at Heathrow, grandparents David and Susan Hanfield get to see their new granddaughter Carlotta, who was born in February in Berlin, Germany.
Very excited.
Tremendously excited, of course.
Yeah, it's been a long time. We've been waiting for this moment for quite a long time. And then we only heard a week ago that they booked the flight. So, you know, it's been very exciting.
Grandmother Susan struggles to hold back the tears of joy. Becca Wyatt and her mother Kate couldn't stop laughing after being reunited. Becca, who arrived from the United States after being away for 5 years, described being back in the UK as amazing.
Absolutely fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. I've been waiting for a long time for her to come back.
It's amazing. It's an amazing feeling to be back and to be home and be able to go see my family. And it's a I can't describe it. It's amazing.
You're just going to laugh.
I am, because I don't know what else to do.
Arrivals from the EU and US are required to take a pre-departure test and a PCR test on or before the second day after they arrive in England. Heathrow Airport CEO John Holland Kay on Monday expressed hope to open up to more vaccinated passengers from other countries on the government's amber list.
So places like Canada should also be added in. We need to see the cost of testing come down. That's a big constraint on a lot of people from travelling. It can cost over £100 to have all the tests. So let's move to a lateral flow test instead of that. And let's see the green list expanded. Let's be confident in the vaccines. The tests have shown that they work against Delta and Beta variants. So we can start to show that vaccination will get us back to our lives as they used to be.
Ministers have warned the government that tens of thousands of jobs in the aviation sector are at risk unless the government further relaxes rules on international travel. Reports have suggested there's a fallout among cabinet ministers over proposals to introduce an amber watch list. It would apply to countries at risk of being moved into the red category, which requires hotel quarantine for 10 days at a cost of £1,750 for an adult. Hugh Merriman, the Tory chairman of the Commons Transport Committee, told the BBC an amber watch list will be viewed as a massive red flag which is likely to cause bookings in those countries on that watch list to collapse. In my view, we don't need any more uncertainty, complexity or anxiety for passengers or this beleaguered sector. It just needs clarity. Ministers are due to meet on Thursday to review the traffic light system and decide the travel rules that will be in place for most of August. Currently, France is the only EU country not part of the quarantine exemption because of fears over the South African variant coming from the country. Last week, the French Junior Minister on European Affairs, Clément Beaune, said it was incomprehensible on health grounds. He said the Beta or South African variant represents less than 5% of cases in France. In a letter to Transport Secretary Grant Shapps over the weekend, industry body Airlines UK said the measures wouldn't improve consumer confidence, with UK travellers booking trips at only 16% of pre-pandemic levels, compared with 60% in Germany and 49% in France. Neil Woodrow, NTD News, London.
Prime Minister Boris Johnson today spoke of a need to get the travel industry moving again. He also said that he wanted an approach towards travel restrictions that is as simple as we can possibly make it. The government has decided to modify the NHS COVID-19 app so that fewer contacts are required to self-isolate. Health Secretary Sajid Javid says the changes are to ensure we are striking the right balance between reducing disruption and protecting those at risk. And in other news, tests conducted at 4 major railway stations and on intercity trains show no traces of the CCP virus. Scientists swabbed escalator handles, ticket machines and benches, as well as taken air samples. Imperial College London examined the results, finding no contamination of any surface or airborne particles of the virus. Network Rail says 2 rounds of testing were carried out at London Euston, Birmingham New Street, Liverpool Line Street and Manchester Piccadilly Station in both January and June. The tests were also repeated on trains running between those stations. And in other news, Berlin police say today a man has died after being detained by officers during banned protests against lockdown measures on Sunday. About 600 protesters were arrested during clashes. Both sides accuse each other of violence. NTD's Kos Temenes has the story.
Thousands of people turned out in Berlin on Sunday to protest against the German government's lockdown measures and for the restoration of basic rights. That's despite authorities and courts banning several protests that had registered, including one for over 22,000 attendees. Police say during an arrest a 49-year-old demonstrator died. They say he had complained of tingling in his arm and chest while officers checked his ID. A routine investigation has been opened into the man's death. The protests took place mostly in Berlin's Charlottenburg neighborhood and the central Tiergarten Park. It led to multiple clashes between police and protesters.
At various locations there were attempts to break through barriers, including violent attempts, so we were also required to actually break this resistance. This means that we used direct coercion and arrested specific individuals.
Police say they arrested around 600 demonstrators. Protesters criticized several officers for excessive behavior.
I was never pushed around that much as today. Today I was actually on the road as a live streamer all the time, mostly with a press card, so they were made aware of it straight away. So there was definitely a certain aggressiveness there.
The UN Special Rapporteur on Torture has asked for evidence for one incident where a police officer appears to strangle and push a woman to the ground. On Monday, a government spokesperson condemned protesters for misusing the right to protest and several outbursts of violence. The anti-lockdown movement in Germany has at times drawn tens of thousands of supporters to its demonstrations in Berlin and across the country. Kos Temenes, NTD News.
Thousands of people took to the streets of Paris and other French cities on the weekend. They were opposing a recently passed law requiring a health pass for entry to public venues. NTD's 88 Ken brings us this report.
Thousands of people took to the streets in Paris and several cities across France over the weekend. They were opposing a mandatory health pass for entry to many public venues.
I won't go to restaurants. I don't give a damn. I won't sell my soul to go to the cinema or for other nonsense. That's it. There is more at stake. Freedom. There is nothing above freedom. We have started losing all of our liberties, so it must stop. That's enough. We must put an end to their nonsense.
In Paris, some demonstrators clashed with police as officers tried to control the protests. About 3,000 officers were deployed in the French capital, striving to keep demonstrators on the authorized path. Several protesters were seen targeting journalists and preventing them from covering the events. The health pass was introduced as the French government battles a fourth wave of CCP virus infections. Visitors going to museums, cinemas or swimming pools are already denied entry if they cannot produce the pass showing they have been vaccinated or had a recent negative test.
We're creating a segregated society, and I think it is unbelievable to be doing this in the country of human rights. So I took to the streets. I have never protested before in my life. I think our freedom is in danger.
Parliament approved a law at the end of July that will make vaccinations mandatory for health workers and extend the health pass requirement to bars, restaurants, trains and hospitals. It was the third weekend in a row that people took to the streets to oppose President Macron's new COVID-19 measures. Eddie Aitken, NTD News.
French President Emmanuel Macron has taken legal action against a Billboard owner who depicted him as Hitler. The case has turned into a test of where France draws a line between freedom of expression and being offensive. NTD's Joyous brings us the details.
Michel-Ange Fleury, owner of a French street advertising business, is facing legal action after he posted a picture showing President Emmanuel Macron dressed like Adolf Hitler. Fleury put up the Macron billboards in response to a law adopted by the French Parliament this month, which bars people from some public venues unless they are fully vaccinated against COVID-19 or can show a negative test.
For me, vaccination is not a problem. It's an individual choice, but the health pass has become an impediment on freedom.
The French government argues that the new law is needed to encourage greater vaccination rates. But it faces strong opposition and has triggered large-scale protests. Protesters say the rules trample on civil liberties and accuse the president of acting like a dictator. Mr. Fleury says depicting Macron as Hitler was an exercise in political satire. But Macron's personal lawyers and his party have filed legal complaints, alleging that the depictions were a public insult. Fleury says he didn't expect the president would file a complaint against an ordinary French citizen. After all, he says, it was just caricature.
I caricature, and as such it's meant to be exaggerated. People may or may not like it, but it is all the same. Caricature will remain caricature.
Mr. Fleury says Macron's decision to sue him shows he's headed towards a monarchy. He says the consensus in his country is on the side of the freedom of speech. This has become a test case on the limit of the freedom of expression in society. Whatever the court's verdict, it will have repercussions in France for years to come. Joy Duguid, NTD News.
According to experts, new variants of the CCB virus are to be expected and may be less dangerous. NTD's France correspondent David Vivez met with a doctor and lawmaker who says the latest data shows vaccination may not be effective enough to quell the virus.
In France, several cases of transmission among vaccinated people have been reported. According to doctor and French Member of Parliament Martin Vonner, there may even be situations where vaccinated people are more at risk than those who are unvaccinated.
I can give you one example. A researcher told me this story. In Guyenne, in a gold mine, there's a new outbreak. The more concerned people are those who have received the 2 shots. Why? Because there are 2 variants, Delta and Gamma, and it seems non-vaccinated people have a better natural immunity against the 2.
According to experts, the virus will likely continue to mutate, creating more variants. But those variants also might be less dangerous. Voners say viral evolution is normal, as the virus responds to treatment.
This is totally normal. The vaccination campaign put the virus under pressure. It is then mutating, but it is also both more contagious and less dangerous.
According to microbiologist and infectious disease expert Didier Raoult, the Delta variant is 60% more contagious, but less and less people are dying from it. Vonner says this casts doubt over the efficacy of the vaccine campaigns.
We see today that vaccination does not protect against the latest variants. This is normal, as the first vaccines were created with the Wuhan strains.
However, some studies still support the vaccine's effectiveness. According to one published on July 27th, the Pfizer vaccine is 80% effective at preventing serious illness. This number had reached 90% before the Delta variant, the study says. David Vivez, NTD News, Paris.
Still to come, a Belarusian Olympic sprinter is seeking asylum in Poland. She alleges her team had tried to force her to fly home. That and more after the break. Wildfires sweep across parts of Turkey for the 6th day. Residents and tourists evacuate. NTD's Al Rhodes has the story.
Parts of Turkey and Italy engulfed in wildfires. Tourists and residents run for their lives. At least 8 have died in Turkey. Firefighters tackle wildfires near coastal resorts in southern Turkey for a 6th day. Nearly 130 fires have broken out across the country since Wednesday. The government says more than 120 are under control. Firefighting planes from Spain and Croatia are arriving to help in the operation. With fires still blazing in some coastal areas on Sunday, residents and tourists evacuated in small boats and cars. The Coast Guard and 2 Navy ships waited out at sea in case a bigger evacuation was needed.
Everything is gone and disappeared. 1 century of people's labour is lost. I feel so much pain, like a lost child.
Believe me, it doesn't take an hour to spread to 1,000 meters. It takes 10 to 20 minutes. Would you believe it? It goes that fast.
In Italy, a wildfire swept through a pine wood near the coastal town of Pescara on Sunday. Eyewitness video shows the sky above a beach darkened by the smoke, forcing some beachgoers to flee. Local media said hundreds of people were evacuated from their homes and over 30 needed hospitalization. The blaze was brought under control on Monday. A heat wave across southern Europe, fed by hot air from North Africa, has led to wildfires across the Mediterranean coast. Earl Rhodes, NTD News.
A Belarusian Olympic sprinter has received a humanitarian visa from Poland after she refused to board a flight in Tokyo. She said Belarusian officials had tried to force her to fly home, and she feared for her safety. NTD's Eddie Aiken has more.
Kristina Tymnoskaya, a Belarusian sprinter who competed at the Tokyo Olympics, received a humanitarian visa from the Polish embassy in Tokyo, a day after refusing to board a flight home. The Polish government says she's planning to leave for Poland in the coming days. The 24-year-old had been due to compete in the women's 200 meters on Monday, but she said on Sunday she was taken to the airport. She refused to board a flight and sought protection from Japanese police at the airport. Tymnoskaya has published a plea for help on Telegram.
I am asking the International Olympic Committee for help. There is pressure against me and they are trying to get me out of the country without my permission. So I am asking the IOC to get involved in this.
The IOC says it is supporting the athlete. Poland's Deputy Foreign Minister says Tymnoskaya is safe and in good condition after walking into the Polish embassy. He says she will be free to pursue her sporting career in Poland.
If she would only like, of course, she can continue. She's free to pursue her sporting career in Poland, but that would be her decision.
The incident has focused renewed attention on the political crisis in Belarus, a former Soviet state under the authoritarian rule of Alexander Lukashenko. Police there have cracked down on dissent, following a wave of protests triggered by an election last year, which the opposition says was rigged. In March, the IOC refused to recognize the election of Lukashenko's son as head of the Belarusian Olympic Committee. Both father and son were banned from attending the Games. Eddie Aitken, NTD News.
In the Tokyo Olympic Village, more than 80% of people are vaccinated against the CCP virus. Testing is compulsory and movement is stringently curtailed. None of that is true for the giant Japanese capital that hosts the Olympic bubble. Lucy Fielder brings us this report.
In one community, vaccination rates above 80%. In the other, just 26%. In one, compulsory testing. In the other, tests are hard to come by and some are just resigned to catching COVID. Welcome to the Tokyo Olympics, a tale of two cities. life in the hermetically sealed bubble, and outside in the rest of the host city. Here in the athletes' village and press centre, an experiment in extreme COVID controls. Organisers say it's almost certainly the most tested community anywhere in the world. More than 50,000 athletes, officials and journalists are tested before flying, upon arrival, and then regularly, daily for athletes. So the positivity rate is just 0.02%. Athletes are quarantined if they test positive. Journalists are subject to strict rules and contract tracing. Masks are needed at all times and the sanitizer all over the place. Almudena Rivera Martinez, a reporter for Spain's Marca sports paper, says the restrictions make work difficult.
For example, in our case, we can't go to a part of Tokyo with an athlete because Tokyo is forbidden to us. The Japanese authorities have banned us for 14 days, and the athletes also. We cannot walk around the venues or go straight from one to the other. So it limits our coverage because you can only speak to them in the mixed zone or over the phone. I could have used the phone from Spain.
State of emergency Tokyo, where lockdown fatigue has set in, fourth time around. Bars are meant to close at 8 p.m, but many flout mostly voluntary restrictions. Many Tokyoites say the government pressing ahead with the Olympics made it feel acceptable to go out. In the densely populated Ikebukuro district this week, young people crowd onto outdoor stairs for a makeshift party. Yuka Toma works in the area part-time.
At this point, there's not much to do even if you get coronavirus. I don't want to get infected, but there are many people who can't avoid it. I work in Ikebukuro and I'm also in the customer service industry, so no matter what I do, I'm bound to get it. I started to hang out with others since anyone can get it no matter how hard they try not to.
The games are being held with hardly any spectators and residents are asked to stay home.
A forgotten painting technique is seeing a revival in one of Russia's major cities as local artists seek to restore this tradition. NTD's Anna Rodriguez has more on this.
In the Russian city of Volkhov, there's a saying, "Where the rose blooms, love lives." The proverb refers to a local folk painting centered around a rose. An artist at a Volkhov painting workshop tells us a romantic story behind the blue and red flower. A girl got badly ill. A boy who loved her prayed to the god of the Volkhov River to give him a wonderful flower to heal her. The god answered his prayer. The girl recovered and the rose became a symbol of love. It's believed that the art of painting on wood in the Volkhov district began at the end of the 19th century. Various household items were painted this way, most commonly spinning wheels. But recently this style could only be found in museums.
We started to ask ourselves, is it possible to revive the craft that was dominant in a certain territory?
Lebedev and his team decided to take Volkhov painting classes to St. Petersburg to expose this traditional art form to modern Russians.
During the art process, you can look at yourself through an inner process.
The design initially only used two colors, red and blue, symbolizing fire and the water of Volkhov River. In Soviet times, the rules of Volkhov patterns were not observed and unconventional colors were introduced. Lebedev and his team are determined to revive the traditional Volkhov pattern. Anna Rodriguez, NTD News.
Breeding pandas is incredibly hard, but a zoo in France is lucky to have a panda couple giving birth to 2 cubs this morning. NTD's Trevor Piper has the story.
Beauval Zoo in central France welcomed the birth of 2 baby pandas early on Monday. Their mother and father are at Beauval on a 10-year loan from China. The twins are their second and third cubs. They had the first panda ever born in France in 2017.
This is an incredible moment, since we have 2 babies. This was the case 4 years ago, but one of the 2 did not survive. Right now we have 2 wonderful babies that are in great shape.
The zoo says the cubs will spend a few years in France before being sent to China. They were born lively, pink and plump shortly after 1 a.m.
It's the end and the beginning of a new story. It's the end of the pregnancy, and now we'll see how these babies are raised. It's also going to be a lot of work, but it's very exciting and very interesting to do.
There are about 1,800 pandas living in the wild in China and about 500 in captivity worldwide. China for decades gifted friendly nations with its unofficial mascot in what was known as panda diplomacy. More recently, the country has loaned pandas to zoos on commercial terms. Trevor Piper, NTD News.
That's the news for today, and thanks for tuning in. I'm Stuart Lees. Thank you for watching our daily news show on YouTube. You can also watch our other programming on channel 190 on Sky TV or on Freeview via channel box on channel 271. In the meantime though, please give this video a like and hit subscribe to our channel. Have a good day.